I couldn't even hold the hilt of a sword for several swings. My meridians were damaged, but I couldn't give up. I ran through the fields as if my life depended on it, attracting a few onlookers. They mocked me for training, but I absolutely paid them no mind and continued. The same day, I found out I'd been stripped of my title as young master and couldn't access the family library, but I didn't stop training because of that. This beauty stood up for me, confronting the bullies. Just as she was about to be killed, I protected her. Then, I decided to duel to protect the people I cherished. I ended the fight in a second. The bullies were totally shocked. This was not the young master they knew. In reality, I was not the young master, but his escort warrior. The patriarch had given me an order to protect his son, the future head of the clan. But 15 years later, when the patriarch was killed, the clan that had been one of the top 10 clans was ruined in the young master's hands. The family's prestige shriveled in an instant. People abandoned the Cheon clan, but I stayed by Cheon Muryang's side, devoting my entire life as his escort warrior. When we faced the absolute destruction of the clan, this same man I'd sacrificed my freedom for betrayed me, stabbing me from behind with his sword. I was shocked. Was this the only reward for my devotion? A blade through my back?
I looked at the terrified Trash breathing heavily, his body trembling. I fell to my knees, trying to use my sword to stabilize myself, to keep from collapsing. They say you can't fix a person. More enemies surrounded us from all sides as the rain continued to fall. The Trash couldn't believe what he'd done. He looked around, watching as the men in red coats unsheathed their swords and came closer. I tried to hold myself upright, breathing heavily. His name rang in my head. Cheon Muryang. Did he think he'd be spared if he offered up my neck? Did he think that by joining hands with the demonic cult, the Cheon clan he'd ruined himself would rise again? Did he think that was the way to survive? The rain fell more heavily. My expression tightened as I stared at him. He was wrong. Thunder raged outward with loud crashes and bright light, exposing the faces of those who'd taken our clan. One had a face pierced with needles and thread like a zombie. Another wore a goat mask covering his face, white eyes gleaming like a demon. This sight shocked the Trash. He stumbled backwards. If he wanted to live, he shouldn't have brought them in. Another man, looking like he'd stepped from legend, raised his spear. With one strike of his blade, he sliced Cheon Muryang in two. I realized I shouldn't have served the eldest young master from the start. I asked the deceased patriarch if he could see what his trash of a son had caused. The eldest young master was not worth protecting. Regret flooded through me. I should have just abandoned that piece of trash. Anger filled my face as I threw my sword away. It bounced off the floor. I knelt to the ground and looked up at the falling rain as the men in red coats surrounded me with their swords. Who was to blame now? Only had regret. Thinking back, I'd originally had no name. After being taken in by the Cheon clan patriarch, I became Mu Myong, nameless. The rain continued falling heavily. Their swords pressed against my neck. If I were to be reborn, I hoped I'd have a name. Blades pierced me from all sides. I hoped I would not be reborn as myself again. Like that, the nameless one died. Suddenly, I felt something cold. I opened my eyes. Was death a cold thing? A lady was washing my feet softly. I raised my head to see who it was. A beautiful girl with long black hair was washing my feet. I was suddenly shocked at what was happening. I pushed the girl backwards. What happened? I was alive. I quickly remembered that countless swords had definitely pierced my body. The girl immediately knelt on the floor, begging. She said she hadn't realized the water had gone cold and would bring warm water immediately. I stared at her. Wasn't she Wo Yang, the personal maid who'd served the eldest young master since childhood, the one who always got abused by him? She pleaded for me to graciously forgive her sin. What sin? Why on earth was she calling me young master? More importantly, where was the eldest young master, Cheon Muryang, right now? She raised her head slightly, surprised at what I'd said. She told me I was the young master, Cheon Muryang. I quickly touched my now fat face. I was shocked. What was going on? I quickly bent down, looking at the bowl on the floor, seeing my reflection through the water. I was shocked. What had just happened? It was nighttime, the moon slightly hidden in the clouds. I checked multiple times. This was not a dream. Sitting on the bed, I wondered how I'd come back to life and gone back 15 years in time into the eldest young master's body. I sat with an empty mind and quiet mouth, thinking back to when I'd asked the maid if there was anyone in the family named Mu Myong. She told me she'd never seen such a person. I'd become the eldest young master, Cheon Muryang. Because of that, had Mu Myong ceased to exist? Perhaps this was an opportunity. A chance to protect the Cheon clan with my own hands. I could gradually figure out how. I had time. The clan's destruction was 15 years away. Standing in the middle of the room, I decided to end that thought there. Looking around, I wondered why the eldest young master's bedchamber was so shabby. The room was practically the same size as a regular trainee's quarters. Something caught my attention. A sword was placed on top of a cabinet, glowing. I quickly realized it was the same sword the trash had stabbed me with, the heavenly light sword. Sweat dripped from my face. It was a famous sword, said to be born from a single ray of light cutting through ominous darkness. The treasured sword gifted to the eldest young master of the Cheon clan. That meant the heavenly light sword was mine. Sweat filled my face as my heart began beating faster and faster. I slowly began to unsheath the sword, seeing my reflection. Then I fully unsheathed it. Light illuminated the entire room. My face reddened. I smiled. It was indeed a different league from the sword I'd used before. With just my first swing, I started breathing faster and faster. At the second swing, my body started shaking. On the third, my mouth was wide open as I breathed out heavily, sweat dripping from my face. I fell to one knee. I couldn't hold it. I continued breathing heavily, trying to get back my strength. Dropping the sword, I looked at my hands shaking violently. I was surprised. My breathing and muscles were pushed to their limits from this alone. The moon began to shine brightly over the courtyard where I resided. Inside, I quickly went to a cultivation stance and began to focus on the middle of the room. I thought that even if Cheon Muryang never trained in martial arts, it shouldn't be to the point where I couldn't swing the heavenly light sword a few times. Usually, energy is cultivated in the dantian through the meridians to the whole body. However, I noticed something was wrong with this body. A large mass of energy, unable to pass through the meridians, was trapped in the dantian. Furthermore, these energies were colliding with each other, damaging the meridians and dantian. I realized this seemed to be what happens when children of wealthy families consume elixirs incorrectly, a gold spoon key deviation. Morning quickly reached. Voices of people could be heard at the clan training ground. Many of the clan members were practicing, swinging their wooden swords violently as others dueled. One of them struck his opponent's head with his wooden sword. The guy fell to the ground, shouting about who hit the head with full force during a spar. He touched his head and felt something crack, saying that if he'd known it was like this, he would have hit his head too. The other, looking like a bully, just smirked, telling the guy to stop whining like a little girl. He reminded him that he'd won using only one hand and that he'd lost the bet. He demanded the money and said that if he was resentful, they could throw another round with higher stakes. The guy quickly told him to shut up, that the round was void, but suddenly he noticed something. As he began to stand up, the other person wondered what he was looking at and turned as well. It was me, the fat guy, swinging a wooden sword by the corner. One girl wondered who it was, asking if that was the eldest young master, saying this was the first time he'd come to the training ground. The other guy agreed, asking what was up with this good-for-nothing. I continued swinging the sword as sweat streaked my face. What a hot mess. My body was burdened by just swinging a wooden sword. I dropped the wooden sword at the corner, realizing that with a body like this, sword training was impossible. The guys watching wondered if I was giving up already. The one with the head bandage said he figured as much and told me to hurry up and leave, that there wasn't a single person here who liked me, but I decided to start running first. Losing weight was priority 1. Another guy, dressed like a pretty boy, watched with the other two in surprise. Suddenly, more people in the training grounds noticed me jogging around the field. They watched as I reached the end without stopping. This passed the stress. The one with the head bandage said it looked like I didn't intend to leave. The other one smirked with evil intent, repeating what the head bandage guy said, saying that he'd have to make me want to leave. I kept running, my lungs burning with every desperate breath. My body felt like it was falling apart from the inside. Those spiritual pills, the ones the original Cheon Muryang had taken, had turned to poison in my veins. If he'd actually trained properly instead of relying on shortcuts, Others' body would have had incredible martial power. What a waste. A blade sliced through the air, missing my face by inches. Before I could react, something slammed into my stomach, the hilt of a sword. The impact sent the weapon spinning until it embedded itself in a wooden pillar with a solid thunk. I turned my head and stared at the sharp blade lodged in the wall beside me. Ice flooded my veins. This wasn't training. The bastard had used a real weapon. The attacker strolled toward me, wearing a smirk that didn't reach his eyes. Apologies. The sword slipped. Behind him, his friends erupted in laughter. That smile told me everything I needed to know. Every bit of this was deliberate. I glared at them, rage boiling in my chest. The group huddled together, speaking just loud enough for me to hear. This place is far too dangerous for the young master. They wanted me gone. Their leader probably thought it to Asura. He turned back to me with that same infuriating grin, offering another hollow apology. I forced myself to stay calm. Thank you for your concern. I'll be more careful. Then I turned around and went straight back to running, Laughter exploded behind me. I heard coins clinking as they collected their bets, already planning which tavern they'd drink at with their easy winnings. But I felt eyes burning into my back, their leader still watching me with pure hatred. I didn't stop. Not for a single second. The absurdity of it struck me hard. These warriors are insulting their own master like common thugs. But then another thought surfaced. The Cheon family martial arts, techniques I'd always dreamed of learning. Now, I actually had access to the family library where those secrets were kept. I arrived at the Heavenly Dragon Library, only to find my path blocked. "What did you just say?" I asked, unable to hide my irritation. A grumpy-looking guard stared me down, his expression carved from stone. His spear remained firmly planted between me and the entrance. He repeated his words slowly, deliberately. "Cheon Muryang has lost his rank as the young head of the family." The words hit me like a physical blow. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Your entry is denied," the guard added flat. Both guards stood firm, blocking the doorway. I stood there, powerless, defeated. Finally, turned my back on the library and walked away, unable to do a single thing about it. I collapsed onto my bed, every muscle screaming. Alone in my plain, cramped room, I let the reality of the day sink in. Of course, it all made sense now. I'd lost my noble title. My original plan, learning to absorb the energy from those medicines, was worthless now. I needed something new. I thought about Cheon Muryang's childhood. It hadn't been easy for him either. This wrecked body, enemies on all sides, subordinates who'd stab me in the back without hesitation. Maybe that's why he'd seen even his own bodyguard as a threat. I clenched my fist. No, I didn't need excuses. The Cheon family was destroyed because the young master had opened the gates to that dark cult. I'd been alone too, but for a different reason. My intense training in my previous life had isolated me by choice, not circumstance. My eyes caught a food box someone had left in the corner. I opened it and found a mushroom dish. Liang's cooking. I grimaced at the lack of meat. How did Cheon Muryang get so pathetically out of shape eating like this? Still, at least I had one person on my side for this journey. The next morning, I forced myself awake before dawn. Outside, I began stretching, preparing my body for another brutal day of training. Even simple movements felt like dragging weights through mud. I took a deep breath and steeled myself. My whole body screamed in protest from just the warm-up. "You're already awake?" I turned to see Wong approaching, surprised, carrying a box in her hands. "Are you training again today?" she asked. "Yes," I said, the word coming out more awkward than I intended. "Good luck," she offered, turning to leave. I noticed the clothes folded in her box. "Are those my clothes? For the laundry?" She jumped, startled. "I'm sorry. I fell asleep waiting for you last night." I smiled despite myself. My only ally wasn't exactly reliable. Without thinking, I walked toward her. She froze, clearly spooked by the sudden movement. I placed my hand on her shoulder. "Thank you for your hard work." Wong stared at me, completely stunned, unable to understand why I'd suddenly changed. I stepped back, feeling awkward. "Sorry, you're going to have a lot more laundry to deal with soon." Before she could respond, I turned and went back to running, pushing myself into the next phase of training. Behind me, Wong stood frozen, her cheeks flushed, completely baffled by my sudden shift in behavior. That night, under the full moon, I was still at it. My feet pounded through the mansion courtyards, my body screaming for rest. I refused to stop. I had to lose this excess weight. Had to reclaim what this body should have been. My lungs burned. Each breath came shorter than the last. Darkness crept at the edges of my vision. I was close to passing out. Suddenly, a memory surfaced from my old life. An instructor's voice roared in my ears. "Focus on practice. Stop looking around." He accused me of wanting to sneak off to the festival. My punishment, 100 strikes to the head. I took every single one in silence, jaw clenched, eyes forward. Another memory flickered, a little girl's voice complaining that I was too slow during training. Meanwhile, young Cheon Muryang had been laughing, begging to go to the Lantern Festival. Had I ever made a single decision for myself? I'd picked up the sword because I owed the family, head, a debt of kindness. Not because I wanted to, not because I chose it. But now, running under this moon, drenched in sweat and pain, I smiled. This was actually fun. From somewhere in the shadows, Wong watched me with worry etched across her face. I heard her whisper, "Young master." My body betrayed me. My legs gave out and I crashed face first onto the ground. I lay there breathing hard. Wulong had been stronger than I'd imagined. Rain began to fall. I pushed myself up and kept going. The group of bullies appeared again, groaning about my persistence. "Every single day with this guy," one muttered, handing over a bag of coins. "I can't believe I lost the bet." "Just shut up," another said, but the loser didn't care. He raised his voice, letting it carry through the rain. "Even if he becomes head of the family, he'll have no power. You think the elders would follow him? You think Master Cheon San-hak would bow to him?" He laughed bitterly. "We'll just join other groups. We don't owe him anything." The group turned to leave, pocketing their easy winnings. But their leader remained, standing in the rain, watching me, with pure irritation burning in his eyes. I didn't stop running. Not even for a second. The leader spat under his breath. "Idiot, thinks he can win back his old rank." I stopped running, right there, directly in front of them. The attacker's expression shifted. He realized I'd heard every word. In the distance, a girl appeared, holding folded fabric. Her eyes locked onto the scene, her face hard with disapproval. The next day, sunlight flooded the training courtyard. I reached for a sword from the rack, fingers steady. I drew the blade, feeling its weight, and stared toward the future I was carving for myself. I tested my movements, strikes, footwork, transitions. A satisfied smile crossed my face. Finally, I had the stamina to train properly and accelerate the absorption of those medicines. "Take it back!" A female voice cut through the courtyard. I turned and saw the bullies surrounding someone. "Don't insult the young master. You're supposed to defend him." My chest tightened. Wong. She was standing up to them. For me. The leader of the group stepped forward, his face twisted with fury. "What did you just say?" Wong didn't flinch. "Take back what you said about my master." The others laughed and started drifting away, leaving the two of them alone. The leader's eyes went red. "You insolent little..." Still, she held her ground, jaw set, eyes blazing. He snapped. His hand went to his sword, and he drew it in one smooth motion, leveling the blade at her throat. My body moved before I thought. Steel rang against steel as I blocked his strike. The bully whipped around, eyes wide with shock. I stood there, sword raised, shielding Wong. He stammered, unable to form words. He couldn't believe I'd actually challenged him. I met his gaze with cold focus. "Point your sword at me." His mouth opened, but nothing came out. "If you have something to say to her," I continued, "say it to me instead." "Then we settle this with swords," I said, my voice cutting through the tension. The attacker's eyes widened. "Are you officially challenging me to a duel?" I smirked, letting mockery drip from my voice. "A duel?" I paused. "No. This is a life or death struggle." I laid out the terms. "If you win, I'll never set foot on the training field again." "Young master, no." Wong's voice cracked with desperation. I ignored her and drove a wooden sword into the ground between us, the mark of a formal challenge. Wong stared at the sword, horror dawning on her face. I kept my eyes on Nungrio. I can handle insults against myself, but I won't tolerate anyone disrespecting someone who actually cares about me. My voice rose. "Draw your sword, Nungrio. This is what I believe in." "You promise you'll leave?" he asked, uncertainty flickering across his face. "I'm not taking it back." Nungrio prepared himself, confidence returning. He felt superior, stronger, faster. In his mind, I didn't stand a chance. Then something shifted. Power radiated from my body, an aura that didn't belong to this weak frame. Terror flashed across his face. "What's wrong?" I asked, fury burning in my eyes. "Are you scared?" He took a step back. "If you won't come to me," I said quietly, "then I'll come to you." I lunged. My sword cut through the air faster than he expected. He blocked it, barely, and laughed. "Too slow!" But where our blades met, light erupted. The impact sent his sword spinning into the air. It flipped end over end before plunging into the ground right in front of him. Nungrio stared at his empty hand, shock paralyzing him. He couldn't comprehend it. Disarmed, in a single exchange, his mind raced. The target hadn't been him at all. It was his sword. And when had this loser become so strong? "You call that fighting?" I asked coldly. "In a life or death duel, you fight like this?" His knees hit the ground. Pathetic. I picked up his sword and held it before him. "You don't deserve to hold this blade." Blood dripped from my hand, painting the ground red, proof of the force behind that strike. "Think about why you fight," I said, looking down at him. "Only come back when you have an answer." Nungrio knelt there, hand trembling, staring at nothing. His sword lay in the dirt. His purpose, whatever it had been, shattered. I turned to Wong. "Let's go." We walked past the other apprentices. They stood frozen, watching in silence as we left the courtyard behind. Behind us, Nungrio's hand remained outstretched, reaching for something he couldn't grasp. Once we were alone, Wong dropped to her knees. "I'm so sorry, young master." Her voice broke. I got annoyed seeing them mock your efforts. I shouldn't have interfered. You hurt your hand because of me. Stop. I cut her off. The injury isn't your fault. Don't apologize. She looked up at me, stunned. I can take insults against myself, I said firmly, but not against those who care about me. I met her eyes. I will protect my people at any cost. Tears welled up in her eyes. Something in her expression shifted. Recognition, maybe. Memory. I saw it flash across her face. A younger version of me, small and determined, making a New Year's wish. That child had promised to become a leader as strong as an elephant. He'd vowed to train with the sword and protect everyone, even though he was smaller than Wong back then. He'd looked at her with that same stubborn smile and promised, I'll protect you too, no matter what. Now tears of joy streamed down her face. You're finally... Her voice caught. You're finally the great master I used to know. Can you take responsibility for those words? The voice cut through the air. I spun around, raising my sword on instinct, heart pounding. Where? A figure stepped into view. Imposing, unmistakable, Cheon Muryang's uncle, Cheon Sanhak, one of the 3 pillars of the family, grandmaster of 2 corporations. His eyes burned with barely contained rage. I asked you a question, he repeated slowly. Can you take responsibility for what you just said? I lowered my sword slightly and bowed. Uncle, forgive me for not visiting you sooner. In my past life, Cheon Sanhak had been the master I trusted most, the one person whose guidance I'd valued above all others. He ignored my greeting entirely. Stop stalling, he said coldly. Answer the question. I recognized that cold stare immediately. Nothing had changed in 15 years. Protecting my people is my conviction, I said steadily. I'll face whatever consequences come from that. His face darkened with fury. Your people? Your conviction. He stepped closer, voice rising. You use the heavenly sword Dragon Claw, a secret technique. The only way you could have learned it is from a traitor. My stomach dropped. I'll find that traitor, he snarled, and I'll punish them, along with anyone protecting them. I understood instantly. If I couldn't prove myself here, I'd be banned from the training grounds forever. My uncle wasn't just angry. He was looking for an excuse to eliminate me for good. Master Cheon Sanhak glared at me with pure contempt. Waiting. I chose my words carefully, met his eyes directly. The traitor doesn't exist. Shock flickered across his face. I learned the technique from you, master. By chance. For a moment, silence hung between us. Then he laughed. A mocking, bitter sound that echoed through the courtyard. The laughter grew louder, more incredulous. Then it stopped. His hand moved to his sword. In one fluid motion, he leaped into the air, blade drawn, murder in his eyes. He landed hard, the ground cracking beneath his feet. Someone like you couldn't possibly copy that move just by watching. His voice was ice. Prove it. My grip tightened on my sword. I hadn't expected this. A crimson aura erupted around his body. Raw power, barely contained. I've already told you the truth, I said. If you don't believe me, I'll show you another move. His eyes widened slightly. He hadn't expected that level of confidence. You're lying to save yourself, he spat. I don't believe a single word. He turned sharply toward Wong, who stood frozen in terror. You. His voice cut through her like a blade. Tell me what your master is planning. Wong's face went pale. Don't even think about lying to me, he warned, stepping toward her. I'll finish you right here if you do. Her hands trembled violently. She couldn't speak, couldn't move. Her voice trembled. For the past month, the young master has been smiling the whole time. Cheon Sanhak's expression twisted in confusion. What? He usually explodes in rage because of his complex, my uncle said slowly, as if testing her words for lies. Wong nodded, her whole body shaking. Even while running tirelessly at night, she continued, voice growing steadier. He seemed different the entire time. The great young master was always smiling while he trained. Master Cheon Sanhak said nothing, just watched her with those piercing eyes. Wong's sincerity shone through her fear. I was happy to see someone working so hard on their own for once. She glanced at me, then back at him. Even when the others mocked him, he didn't even look their way. He stayed focused. Her voice grew stronger. In the past, he would have exploded or run away, but this time, not once. She swallowed hard. Instead, for the first time, the young master drew his sword to defend me. She looked directly at Cheon Sanhak, tears brimming in her eyes but her voice unwavering. He's changed completely. I believe in him. Silence settled over the courtyard. My uncle's expression remained unreadable, but something shifted behind his eyes. He frowned, making some internal calculation. Then he turned to me. Which martial arts do you know? Just the basic family techniques. He held up 2 fingers. If you defeat the top apprentice in 2 months, I'll try to believe your story. His eyes bore into mine. Challenging. Testing. I smiled. My uncle had always tested me like this. 1 month is plenty. He stared at me, waiting for me to break, waiting for doubt to creep in. I didn't flinch. Finally, he sheathed his weapon. So, be it. He turned and walked away without another word, leaving Wong and me alone in the courtyard. Wong looked terrified, but I grinned, mischievous, satisfied. Head back, I told her. I'd gotten exactly what I wanted. I slung my sword over my shoulder. I still need to run a bit more today. Time blurred after that. Half a month passed in a storm of training. My hands gripped the sword hilt. Steady now. No tremor. I raised the blade and brought it down in a powerful vertical strike that cut through the air with violence and precision. Sweat poured down my face. I'd practically lived in this courtyard for the past 2 weeks. The progress showed. I'd reached the 5th level of the sun art. Most of the yang energy trapped in my body had melted away, but the yin energy remained. Stubborn, difficult to clear. I cursed under my breath. If only I'd been able to grab a better cultivation method from the library before they barred me. I stared at my calloused hands. I wished my energy center would heal itself as easily as these scrapes and bruises. His opponent's so lucky. Gets to humiliate him in front of everyone? Laughter erupted from a group of apprentices nearby. He only knows that one vertical move. Bet he runs before the fight even starts. I ignored them. I knew exactly what this was. My uncle's tactics spreading rumors to make me quit. Probably doesn't know the difference between a hoe and a sword. One of them sneered. I walked straight toward them. Got something funny to share? The speaker froze. I locked eyes with him. Are you the top apprentice? He glared back with contempt. A symbol on his bandana caught my attention. Something familiar. A cocky smile spread across his face. That's right, I'm the best here. He leaned in slightly. Don't worry, I'll go easy on you. Something about his face nagged at me. What's your name? He straightened, formal, despite the mockery. Lee Soki. The name hit me like a blade to the chest. Lee Soki, the traitor, the one who'd leaked information to the dark cult. Rage flooded through me. My jaw clenched so hard my teeth ground together. I turned away without another word while they laughed behind me. Everything had changed. Before, I just wanted to do my best. Now I had a different goal entirely. This traitor was going to pay, heavily. Another 2 weeks passed. The day of the duel arrived. The arena buzzed with spectators. Voices carried through the crowd. I can't wait to see the young master get humiliated. I don't know. Some say he's changed. The judge's voice boomed across the space. Lansori is chat. The crowd fell quiet instantly. The duel organized by Grandmaster Cheon Sanak begins. Now, he turned toward the entrance. Challenger Lee Soki stepped forward. My uncle watched from his elevated seat. Expression unreadable. Lee Soki entered the arena with a confident smirk, sword raised. In his mind, victory was already guaranteed. Then the judge's voice thundered across the grounds, calling Cheon Muryang to step forward for combat. Silence answered him. He scanned the empty entrance, called the name again. Nothing. The crowd began to murmur. Someone laughed. Then another. Then the whole arena erupted, mocking what they assumed was a coward who had fled at the final moment. Cheon Sun-hak's expression sank with disappointment. Lee Soji simply smiled at the spectacle. Then a single calm voice cut clean through the noise. Cheon Muryang is right there. The laughter died. The traitor turned. My uncle straightened on his throne. I walked into the arena. Confusion swept the crowd. Whispers replaced the laughter as eyes searched for the bloated, sluggish young master they remembered. The figure standing before them bore no resemblance to that man. The weight was gone. The posture was steel. The eyes were still. I looked at them and said I was Cheon Muryang, and I was ready. The silence that followed was absolute. They stared, unable to reconcile what stood before them with what they had known. I gave them no explanation. I turned my gaze to the stands, pressed my hands together, and told my uncle I regretted the delay. He frowned, cutting past ceremony, demanding only one answer. Was I ready? I raised my wooden sword, turned it once in my grip, and told him I was. Lee watched from across the arena, studying me in uneasy silence. The confidence he saw on my face irritated him. He convinced himself the weight loss had gone to my head, then shifted his gaze toward the main box, reading the Grandmaster's expression. Then something shifted behind his eyes. The clan leader was watching. The Dragon and Phoenix captains were watching. Every seat that mattered was occupied. A slow, malicious smile spread across his face. This was no longer a fight. It was a stage, and he intended to use it. I saw it all. I had already been dismissed in his mind before the first step was taken. My expression darkened. I knew exactly what manner of man stood across from me. The kind who never climbed with a sword, only with whispers, flattery, carefully placed loyalty to whoever held the most power. In my past life, I had watched him do it. Smile by smile, favor by favor, he had burrowed his way up the hierarchy until he reached a position worth selling. And sell it he did. Every secret, every name, every piece of intelligence the dark cult desired, exchanged for gold and comfort. By the time the betrayal surfaced, justice had no ground left to stand on. The memory left a bitter weight in my chest. But standing here now, facing him before any of it had happened, that bitterness sharpened into something cleaner, a purpose. The crime had not yet been committed, and that was precisely why he had to be stopped. He believed everything was falling into place. Top apprentice, the arena, the audience. His future looked certain. I smiled. He had no idea what was coming. I tightened my grip on the wooden sword, calm, settling over me like armor. I had lived this man's every move, his patterns, his habits, his preferred angles of attack. His career ended today. From above, my uncle's voice cut across the arena, declaring, the fight would end only on his command, not to the death. I heard the rule. I adjusted nothing. Destruction did not require a killing blow. Then the Grandmaster's shout cracked the air like a whip, and I moved. I crossed the distance between us in an instant. Pure explosive speed that left no time to think, only to react. He barely got his guard up. The impact shook the ground beneath us. He felt the difference immediately, though his expression refused to show it. I launched upward and brought the blade down toward his skull, then looked up at me with that rehearsed smirk. He mentioned the rumor about my fight with Nungrio, said he had heard about the technique, the disarm, the unusual movement. His stance shifted as he asked with deliberate mockery how I planned to handle what came next. I said nothing. He would find out. The air shifted. I felt it before he moved. He brought both hands to the hilt, muscles coiling, weight transferring into his shoulders. His eyes carried a dare. Deflect this if you can. The blade came down. The pressure it carried was not ordinary. It tore through the air with the kind of force that demanded respect, and I raised my defense to meet it. Wood screamed against wood. The impact traveled through my arms, my shoulders, down into my spine. The grain of both blades strained under the violence of the collision, threatening to splinter. What should have been a practice bout looked nothing like one. I read the angle and slid to the side, redirecting rather than absorbing. Behind his assault, his mind was already calculating. He had briefly considered going easy, preserving my dignity, keeping appearances clean, but the masters were watching. Every captain, every authority seated in that box represented a rung on a ladder he intended to climb. Mercy had no place in that ambition. He committed everything to the next strike. He told me not to hold a grudge, wearing that smile like a man who had already decided the outcome. The wooden blade shrieked under the pressure as he drove into my guard. Then he abandoned the sword entirely. A kick drove into my chest, brutal, sudden, completely outside the rhythm of the exchange. The impact punched the air from my lungs and sent me skidding backward across the arena floor. I drove my feet down, fighting for ground, and stopped myself before the fall claimed me. I straightened, drew one slow breath. My body had boundaries. That was the reality standing in front of me now, and he was already moving again, giving me no space to acknowledge it. He came at me spinning, blade alive with momentum, voice tearing across the arena with contempt, telling the great young master to pay attention. The wooden sword came down toward my shoulder. The sound it made on impact was dull and heavy. Pain detonated through muscle and bone, and I felt my legs give. A muffled cry left me before I could stop it. My knee met the ground. He raised his fist, stood over me with that winning smile, drinking in the moment. Every calculation had paid off. The performance, the timing, the audience. It had all gone exactly as he had planned. Then the silence reached him. Something was wrong with it. Too complete, too still. He lowered his fist slowly and looked out at the stands. The crowd was lying on its side. He blinked. The training ground rotated lazily around him. Sound had gone somewhere he couldn't reach. He tried to focus, tried to anchor himself, but the disorientation was total and suffocating. A footstep landed hard against the ground beside his face. The impact of it snapped him back. He was on his back, staring up, drool tracking a slow line from the corner of his mouth. Standing over him, looking down with the kind of stillness that needed no words, was Cheon. His lips moved around my name, barely a sound. I looked down at him and asked if he'd enjoyed his nap. His body refused every command he sent it. He lay there, horrified by his own helplessness, until something on the ground beside him caught his eye. A piece of wood, split clean in two. His sword. The memory returned in fragments. Then all at once, in the moment his blow landed, I had not retreated. I had moved through it, into it. In the fraction of a second between his strike and his celebration, I drove the hilt of the broken sword directly into his forehead. With everything I had, the force of his own momentum had done the rest. He left the ground, spun once in the air, and met the stone floor at full speed. He lay there, splayed across the stone, defeat refusing to fully register behind his eyes. His vision swam. He stared up at me, searching for an explanation that would make sense of what had just happened. I looked down at him and said one word, low enough that only he could hear it. Turncoat. Confusion crossed his face. Then I raised my voice for the arena to carry it. I would let it go this once, but he should know I would be watching every move he made. The color drained from him. He reached for denial immediately, constructing the excuse before the humiliation had even finished settling. He had let his guard down. That was all. A momentary lapse, but the panic underneath that story was already eating through it, because no excuse would survive the audience that had witnessed it. He had performed, he had declared, he had promised dominance in front of every person whose opinion shaped his future, and then he had been put on the ground in a single exchange. His reputation had not bent. It had shattered. The crowd confirmed it with their whispers, circling the same disbelieving question. The top apprentice finished in one move. Across the arena, Wool-young could not hold herself together. Tears ran freely down her face, her relief too large to contain. I turned away from him and fixed my gaze on the tower. My uncle sat with a frown carved deep into his expression, something between surprise and irritation working behind his eyes. The breeze moved through the arena. I stood still inside it. Cheon Sun-hak said nothing. He simply stared at me from his seat with an expression I could not read. Below, the crowd churned with debate. Was it skill? Was it a trick? Could the top apprentice truly have fallen that cleanly? My uncle watched me from above and thought with visible annoyance that I was only going to become more insufferable after this. He closed his eyes briefly, steadying himself. Then he rose from his throne, his cape catching the air as the sound of movement silenced the crowd around him. His voice gathered authority as he began to declare the official result. I cut across him. I told the arena. I already knew about the complaints. The declaration died in the air. Every head turned. The crowd exchanged glances, thrown completely off balance by the interruption. I faced them and said it plainly. I knew what they called me behind my back. I knew the words they used. Useless, a pig, a disgrace to the Cheon name. I knew they doubted whether I belonged in the same arena as any of them. Sun-hak watched from his seat with the expression stripped of everything except gravity. Then I steadied my voice and said what needed to be said without dressing it. Past mistakes could not be undone. I owned every single one of them. Wool-young watched me from the crowd, her hands pressed together, her face torn between worry and I continued. I told them I could not name every face I had wronged, and that the number of people I had hurt was too large for me to account for individually. The man who had committed those acts, that hollow, ego-blinded creature, I had called him Cheon Moryang, but even knowing I was not that man anymore, I refused to use that as a shield. The name was still mine. The damage was still mine. I clenched my fist until my knuckles ached because I was Cheon Moryang, and what had been broken under that name was mine to repair. I stood before every apprentice who had suffered under me. I screamed it from somewhere deep in my chest, a sincere apology, without condition, without excuse, for everything I had done, and I bowed my head, low, completely, the kind of bow that left no room for performance. The arena went silent. No one moved. No one spoke. The apprentices looked at one another, searching each other's faces for instruction on how to receive something none of them had ever seen from me before. Young pressed both hands over her heart. In the stands, Cheon Sun-hak did not soften. He sat with his eyes fixed on me. I lifted my head. I told them that if the apology was not enough, if the anger ran too deep for words to reach, the arena remained open. Any challenger, any time, I would be here. I turned to Wool-young and told her it was time to leave. Behind us, my uncle said nothing. He stroked his beard slowly, eyes still fixed on the arena. The sky above the mansion was a clean, unbroken blue. On the walk back, I thanked Wool-young for keeping the heavenly light sword safe during the fight. She admitted she had been trembling with nerves, but holding the weapon had steadied her somehow. When I held out my hand for it back, she didn't move. I looked at her. She looked at the scabbard. I asked her what she was doing. A flush climbed her cheeks. She pulled the scabbard a little closer and asked quietly if she could hold Little Heaven just a moment longer. She said, "Little Heaven." I stopped walking. The nickname struck something old and buried, a voice from another time asking me what I sought to cut through. I turned around sharply. The connection was undeniable, older than this body, older than this life. A nostalgic smile found my face before I could stop it. I never imagined those words would find their way back to me like this. My uncle's voice finally broke his silence. He remarked on the sword technique I had displayed in the arena. He asked why I had not yet asked what I was trying to cut through. I smiled and answered without hesitation. The sky. I told him I intended to cut through the sky itself. My uncle's eyes widened. He stood there absorbing it, and for a moment something cracked through the severity on his face. Absurd, he thought. The most absurd thing he had heard in years, and yet it was the precise answer. The same impossible, uncompromising ambition that had defined his own path with the sword across an entire lifetime. The answer he had never expected to hear from his nephew's mouth. He composed himself and acknowledged what he could no longer deny. He had lost the bet. He told me to name my reward. I asked for access to the library. He said no. That was beyond what this wager could purchase. I brought my hand to my chin. The wish was burning, and I had no intention of wasting it. I shifted the request. One fight, one different opponent, every single day. Permission to train through real combat, granted by the Grandmaster himself. My uncle's eyes narrowed. He studied me the way a man searches a wall for cracks, looking for the angle, the performance, the hidden calculation behind the request. He found none, because there was none. He turned his back, accepted the terms, and walked away with a grunt that carried more irritation than he likely intended. I let myself smile. I gripped the wooden sword and felt everything slot into place, and now I had it, sanctioned and daily. He disappeared into the corridor. Woo-young fell into step beside me as we left the empty arena. After a moment, she asked what the cutting the sky answer had actually meant. I told her it was something only the master and I understood. The sun rose over the mansion and brought a new day with it. Heavy footsteps struck the ground with barely contained fury as Lee moved through the compound, having already heard about the one fight per day arrangement. He told himself I had simply gotten lucky, a fluke, an embarrassment that would not repeat itself. Then he stopped. Not an obstacle, an opportunity, a framework he could corrupt into something far more useful. He reached for his blade. The edge caught the light and threw it back in a clean, dangerous gleam. The reflection stared back at him with the face of a man already planning the damage. In a tavern on the edge of the district, a different kind of chaos unfolded. A figure crashed through the atmosphere of the room, bottle in hand, voice loud enough to rattle the walls. He kicked an innocent man off his seat without looking at him. The customers pressed together in hushed, fearful clusters. Word had already moved through the room. A wealthy noble, someone connected, someone whose name carried consequences. One man rose from his seat with the instinct to intervene, warning him quietly that crossing powerful families never ended with the person who started it. The imposter paid no attention to any of it. He swung the sword in a wide, threatening arc and demanded to know if the Cheon family name meant nothing to these people. On the floor, an old man raised trembling hands and begged him to stop. The blade came down. A single vertical strike, clean and deliberate and completely without mercy. The sound caught the torchlight as it left the wound, spattering across the attacker's face. Heath was treating people like ground beneath his feet. The answer came not in words but in sensation, the sharp, unmistakable taste of iron flooding his mouth. He touched his lip and pulled his fingers back wet. He was bleeding. The imposter did not look back and remarked over his shoulder that the man was exaggerating, performing pain for sympathy. What stared back at him was not the face of someone willing to let this pass. Back in the present, the pieces assembled themselves into a name. That man, humiliated, bloodied, burning with the kind of rage that ages into obsession, was Shamayang Hak, my very first scheduled opponent. I stood in the training courtyard, sword in hand. I leaped into the air and brought the blade down in a single clean slash. Precise, controlled, deliberate. I did not notice him arrive. He stood at the edge of the courtyard watching in silence. The scar on his face caught the light. He was angry. I could feel it even without looking, certain it was Mu-myong who had proposed this spar. But he held himself back. He had not come to exchange pleasantries. He had come for a real fight, and he intended to give nothing less than everything he had. Then someone else spoke. I turned to find her, Mu-myong's personal maid, holding a tray of cakes and tea, her posture composed, her smile quiet and warm. She said that once he started training, he lost all sense of time and surroundings, and that perhaps I should have something before the spar began. It would be a little while yet. I recognized her then, the same woman who had crossed paths with Nyong Ri-on. I told her he was fine, that the spar was almost due. She did not argue. She simply raised the tray a little higher and held my gaze, the smile never leaving her face. The cakes were right there. Her eyes were steady and patient. I sat down and took one. After a moment, I asked whether he truly trained like that every single day without exception. She told me he did, without fail. She said she was glad to see the dedication, the discipline, but that she also worried he was pushing himself too hard. I asked her plainly whether he had put her through hell. She did not look away. She told me it was true, that the young master had made many mistakes in the past, that he had changed, that the person before her now was working hard to make up for all of it, and so she believed in him. I turned that over quietly. I could not deny it. Something about Mu-myong was different. Watching from where I sat, I could see it was not pretense. He was genuinely putting in the work, even if what he was doing was nothing more than repeating a single overhead swing after each leap over and over again. Then I went still. I looked closer. The position of his feet, the height of the blade at its peak, the exact way his hands gripped the hilt. Identical. Every single time. Not similar. Identical. I sat with that for a moment, unable to look away, wondering how that trash had managed to pull off something like that. And the trajectory of the blade. He began to see it. The shape of something forming. Something that looked like him. Then he caught himself. There was no way. That was not possible. But Mu-myong was already fighting him. Not literally. Not yet. But in his mind, the duel had already played out. And in it, Mu-myong Myung had beaten him, easily, cleanly, without hesitation. He froze where he stood. Sweat traced a slow line down the side of his face. He could not move, could not think. He had not even stepped into the sparring ground, and already Myung's blade was aimed at him, inside his own head, and he had no answer for it. It was unbelievable. Then Myung looked up and noticed him. He smiled, lowering the sword, and apologized for making him wait. Said it was good to see him, called him by name, Myung-hak. Myung-hak hesitated. Something shifted behind his eyes. He had not expected that. Myung smiled wider, saying that of course he knew his name, that Myung-hak was going to be an official warrior of the clan one day, and that he was making every effort to learn the name of each trainee under the clan's roof. Myung-hak stood with that for a moment. Every trainee. He turned it over slowly, trying to understand how that was even possible. Then Myung's gaze dropped just slightly, and his expression shifted. He asked about the scar, whether he was the one who had put it there. Myung-hak's face went still, flat, quiet in the way that something long buried goes quiet when it is finally named. He said yes. Myung held the silence for a breath. He said he did not remember the details, that it was the old him and that he owned that. Then he folded his hands around the hilt of his blade and lowered his head in a bow. He said that he had left Myung-hak a scar that would never fully heal and that he knew no apology could undo it. But he hoped, with everything he had, that Myung-hak could accept it. The courtyard went quiet. Myung-hak did not move. He stood there, looking at the top of Myung's bowed head. The first son, Cheon Mu-ryang, bowing to him. The first son was not a man who admitted mistakes. Everyone who had ever served under the Cheon clan knew that. He was the kind of man who shifted blame like second, and yet his head was lowered. Myung-hak stood there, staring, and felt something in his thinking begin to crack. He found himself asking whether this was truly the same person, whether what the maid had said was actually true. Then, he set the cup down on the tray, quickly, cleanly. He said he lost. Then, he turned and walked. Myung blinked. He called after him that the spar hadn't even started, that he didn't understand. Myung-hak didn't stop walking. He raised one hand in a loose wave over his shoulder and said he had lost today, and that he would come back and challenge him properly once he had actually prepared himself. His sword hung at his side as he went, unhurried, and neither Myung nor the maid moved until he had gone. They stood there a moment, watching the empty space he had left behind. Then Myung caught it, just barely, the edge of a smile on Myung-hak's face as he turned the corner. He wondered aloud whether that meant the apology had been accepted. The maid watched the same spot for a quiet moment, then said, "Probably." Myung turned to her then and told her he had a favor to ask. He wanted her to write it all down, every single thing he had done wrong, nothing left out, nothing softened. And if there was anything he had done to her personally, he told her not to hide it. He wanted it written down too. She stilled at that. He sat with the weight of his own words and thought that this was where it had to begin. Not with grand gestures, not with a single apology in a courtyard, but with an honest accounting of every wound left behind. After that, the duels continued as they always had. One opponent shouted across the ring that this was his karma, that everything coming was deserved. Myung was already in the air before the words finished leaving the man's mouth. He came down clean and fast, striking across several points in quick succession. The wooden sword hit the ground. The man followed. Myung smiled and told him that was good work, and that they should go again sometime when the opportunity came. He didn't lose a single bout. Every challenger who stepped into that ring left it defeated, most of them in a single exchange. No one overcame Cheon Mu-ryang. When the last match was done, the final loser walked out of the ring and straight past the tray the maid had brought, ignoring it entirely without a word. That irritated her. She wrote his name down on the failure list without hesitation. The man himself walked away in pieces, physically spent, pride in ruins. And as he went, his mind drifted back to the moment he had first watched Myung begin his training. He traced every day forward from that point to now, and by the time he reached the present, all that was left was regret. By the time the month of sparring ended, Cheon Mu-ryang had not lost once. The sun was setting through his window when he settled into cultivation. White energy gathered and moved around him like breath. He felt it clearly. He had reached the 7th stage of the Cheon Yang divine art, but the problem was still there, unmoved. The same wall it had always been. That yin energy, cold and stubborn, lodged deep, blocking the Ren and Du meridians, the two most vital pathways in the Dantian. It didn't matter how much energy was filling the Dantian. He couldn't use any of it. Not truly, and if he tried to force it through, his meridians would rupture. Qi deviation would follow, and there would be no coming back from that. He had reached the ceiling of what the Cheon Yang divine art could offer him. A basic art had taken him this far, but no further. He needed access to the Heavenly Dragon Library. He needed something higher. Then a feeling crept in, quiet at first, then louder. The specific discomfort of having forgotten something important. His eyes opened. The color left his face. He shot to his feet. The family head was returning today. The man who had taken him in when he had nothing, no name, no direction, nowhere to go. He had been sitting here cultivating while that man was on his way home. He changed quickly, pulling on something far more fitting, clean, clean, comfortable, appropriately luxurious, and as he straightened his collar, a thought passed through him with a strange and unfamiliar warmth. He supposed he would have to call him father now, something he had once only dreamed of. Then a voice came from outside, sharp with urgency, cutting through everything. It was his personal maid's friend. She said something terrible had happened. His chest tightened. He asked what. She told him his fiancé was doing something right now to her. He was already moving before she finished the sentence. Around the corner, in the courtyard near the kitchens, his personal maid was on her knees. Her body trembled. Her hands were pressed flat against the ground, her head low, apology after apology spilling from her lips in a voice stretched thin with fear. Before her stood a woman, composed, imperious, dressed in the manner of someone who had never once been told no, flanked on both sides by her personal guards. Her expression was one of cold, physical fury. The stain on her clothing was visible where the maid had apparently made contact, and that single fact had become the entire world as far as she was concerned. A short distance away, entirely removed from the tension unfolding behind him, the head chef hummed quietly to himself as he plated the final touches on a bowl of fried rice. He was satisfied, happy, even. He had finished on time. He glanced sideways at the younger cook working beside him, and a slow smile spread across his face. That dish was his. Wool-young knelt in the courtyard, forehead against cold stone, trembling. Before her stood a noble lady in a white cloak marked with blood. She declared that apologies resolved nothing when the garment was already destroyed. Then, lifting her fan to her face, she gave the order. The lead warrior stepped forward. His blade cleared the scabbard with a clean whisper of metal and rose above Wool-young's exposed neck. A servant came screaming from the building. The executioner did not look up. The blade came down. Steel met steel, an inch from Wool-young's neck. A second sword caught the strike and held it. The impact rang across the courtyard and froze everyone in it. I stood over her, blade drawn. The Tang clan warriors recovered and surrounded me, weapons up, in a tone that left no room for misreading. Wool-young looked up at me. Her voice broke around the words, "Young master." The warriors demanded my name and my authority to interfere in Tang clan affairs. I told them I was the eldest young master of the Cheon family. Several of them stiffened. The lady's composure shifted. She offered a polite apology, mentioned the Sichuan Tang clan, and introduced herself with a faint smile. Tang So-hee. The name hit me like a blade to the chest. Memory tore through me without warning. Tang So-hee had been my wife, and she had been the architect of everything the Cheon family lost. The Tang clan were renowned masters of poison and antidote, the only people capable of untangling what had been done to me. The family head had offered marriage in exchange for treatment. The Tang clan had accepted without hesitation. Tang So-hee had arrived in wedding robes, looked at her bloated, unconscious groom, and accepted the situation without flinching. The marriage was rushed through, and over the decade that followed, while I supposedly recovered, the Tang clan worked quietly and thoroughly. They exploited the family head's leniency, embedded themselves into every significant relationship the Cheon family held, and used us as a bridge to dominate the Jaedong region entirely. I pulled myself back to the courtyard and fixed her with a stare. I made no effort to soften. I asked my question again. She glanced at her blood-stained cloak as though she had only just remembered it was there. She explained, without particular interest, that the maid had ruined her clothes and had been punished accordingly. I asked her directly whether a stained garment was sufficient reason to put a Cheon family servant to death. She scoffed. She suggested I did not fully appreciate the value of what had been destroyed. She proposed that the maid could, hypothetically, have been an assassin, and reminded me that what I had interrupted was simply Tang clan law being enforced. That was enough. I told her plainly this was not Tang territory. These were Cheon walls, and within them, Cheon law held authority. She had overstepped, and she had insulted my family. One of her guards pushed forward and argued that law, which dissolved the moment it crossed a threshold, was never real law to begin with. Tang So-hee's lips curved faintly. She told me to stop them if I could. The lead guard stepped forward at her signal. His blade came free, and something radiated off him. I recognized it immediately. Sword aura. The blade came at me glowing with condensed internal energy, and I met it head on. Steel collided, and the force of it traveled through both my arms and deep into my shoulders. Sparks scattered across the stone. Nearby, I caught movement from the corner of my eye. Tang So-hee's gaze had shifted to Wool-young, something cold and calculating passing across her face as she reached for a needle. Courtyard exploded into motion. Blade met blade across the stone as I worked to hold my ground. Our swordsmanship was level, but his internal energy was not. With every exchange he pushed and I gave ground, teeth locked against the pressure mounting through each collision. Strength against strength was a fight I would lose. I changed. I dropped the brute force entirely and turned my attention to the sword itself. When his blade entered my range, I executed the Heavenly Dragon Sword's Dragon Claw capture. My hands moved faster than his eyes could track, redirecting his aura away from his body entirely. The deflected energy hit the courtyard stones and shattered them. He stared at his own blade, unable to account for what had just happened. But I was on the ground, disarmed. The guard retrieved his sword with a scoff, dismissing everything he had just witnessed as insufficient. He was not wrong. The technique had been perfect. The gap in raw internal power had not closed. No. Then Tang Sohee's voice cut across the courtyard. She stepped forward, remarking with mild amusement that she was glad to see her fiancé possessed the character to defend even a servant. She told me she would see me at the evening banquet and expressed hope that I would be more agreeable company then. A cry stopped everything. I spun. Wolyong was on the ground, collapsed. Tang Sohee watched. My recovery did not match what her intelligence had reported. If the Cheon family had uncovered the truth of my condition, the marriage arrangement could be reconsidered. She spoke quietly to her guard without turning around. He reported that my swordsmanship was refined, but my internal energy was weak. 2 subordinates would be sufficient to manage me. She gave the order without raising her voice. Oh night, the eldest young master would not be attending the banquet. I was already moving. I reached Wolyong and dropped to my knees beside her. Her face was drained of color, her breathing shallow and labored, dark circles pressed deep beneath her eyes. My gaze moved to the overturned food tray on the ground nearby. Her voice from earlier that morning came back to me, bright, proud, telling me it was not porridge this time. The memory lasted less than a second before fury replaced it. I lifted her carefully and told Hua Hong to bring my sword. I carried her away from the courtyard. Behind us, a spy watched every step with trembling uncertainty, turning over whether to report what he had witnessed to Nanyang Rio. The young master's mansion had become chaos. Doctors moved with urgency around the bed where Wolyong lay. The chief physician finally stepped back, his hands marked with herbs and blood. He told me he had slowed the progression. But if this was Tang clan venom, and I already knew that it was, no treatment in his possession would reverse it. Only their antidote could. I stood beside the bed and said nothing. The guilt sat against my chest like the flat of a blade. I turned to Hua Hong and told her to watch over Wolyong. Her voice shook as she asked where I was going. I picked up my sword and walked out. At the door I stopped. I asked about the clan leader's banquet tonight. As the son of the clan leader, how could I be absent? And tonight, I would show them exactly what it meant to face my anger. Elsewhere in the mansion, Cheon Sun Hak moved alone through a long corridor. Pulling the Tang clan into this conflict was a different kind of danger entirely. These were not people who forgave miscalculation. If anything went wrong, they would not negotiate. They would consume what remained of the Cheon family without hesitation. He exhaled slowly and kept walking. Then he felt it, wild, sharp, the specific quality of a blade moving through open air with nothing holding it back. It was coming from the forest beyond the mansion. Trees shook as force rolled through them in waves. Birds broke from the canopy in every direction, followed the source and found me in a clearing. My sword moved without stopping, cutting through thick trunks as though the wood offered no resistance. Cheon Sun Hak arrived at the edge of the clearing and stayed in the shadows, watching. He read the sword intent immediately, and what he saw was not the heaven-cleaving sword. The technique built to split the sky. Every strike carried killing intent. This was a blade shaped for flesh, not sky. If I continued down this path, the rage would consume me before any enemy could. I gathered everything into one final strike. Up through my shoulders and brought it down. The tree split perfectly in two and hit the ground. The sound rolled through the forest. Dust and leaves burst upward around me. I staggered back, breathing hard, face burning. Cheon Sun Hak stepped forward from the shadows. He asked why someone who had spoken of roaming the heavens was out here cutting down trees. What was I so furious about? I did not turn around. I told him I was weak, that because of that weakness I had failed to protect my people. That if I intended to protect them, I had to become stronger. There was no other path. He repeated the words back slowly. Your people. I turned and lowered my head slightly. The ones I wanted to protect. The ones I intended to stand for. The Cheon family. The name landed differently than he expected. Something shifted behind his eyes. He reached back through memory and found words I had spoken before. Words he now understood he had read incorrectly. Then slowly, he smiled. He said good, and it carried the full weight of a man who did not use that word lightly. He drew his sword. He reminded me that I had claimed to replicate the heavenly dragon sword's dragon claw rain strike from a single observation. He reminded me of my own words, that if shown another form, I would attempt to replicate that too. Could I prove it now? I looked up, uncertain of what was coming. He moved his blade with sudden speed, not to attack, to reveal. He was the one who had created the dragon claw rain strike and passed it to the heavenly dragon sword unit. He had also created the form that followed, but had never taught it to anyone. Energy broke from him like a storm finding open ground. He raised his sword and named the technique, Dragon's Wrath. He launched forward at full speed. As it came straight at me, confusion crossed my face for a fraction of a second. Then his voice struck again with the technique's full name, Reverse Scale Cleaving Sword. Not far from the forest, a group of men waited in the dark. They belonged to my fiancé. Even at that distance, the pressure rolling through the trees reached them. Another glanced in the same direction, acknowledged it, then told the group to stay focused. They had work to finish before the banquet began. One of them produced a small glass bottle. Once administered, I would not move for days. The symptoms would present as intoxication, convincing enough that even a physician would find nothing to contradict the story. Even if I claimed I had been ambushed by disguised disciples, who would believe me? My reputation had already done the work for them. I stood in the clearing amid broken trees, sleeves torn, I looked at Cheon-sun Hak and asked if he would truly go that far, against his own blood. The destruction behind me answered before he could. Trees sheared clean through, dust still suspended in the air. The reverse-scale cleaving sword had not been a demonstration. Cheon-sun Hak stood calm. He asked if I could see the difference between the reverse-scale cleaving sword and the Dragon Claw Rain Strike. He did not wait for my answer. He told me that when a swordsman grows accustomed to his blade, he begins to believe the sword is an extension of his body. That belief feels like mastery. It is actually a weakness. Dragon Claw Rain Strike was built around that exact flaw. It did not attack the sword. It attacked the mind that had forgotten the sword, and the body were two separate things. My eyes sharpened. That was the principle beneath the Dragon Claw Rain Strike. Cheon-sun Hak continued. Even so, the technique had a ceiling. Against masters where the gap in skill was absolute, it would fail. Old memories surfaced in my chest, the precise feeling of not being enough. He was not finished. He said that even experts at the highest level carried one remaining false belief. He asked if I knew what it was. The answer was already forming before the question completed. The principle behind the reverse-scale cleaving sword. I straightened and told him I understood. He studied me and asked if I truly believed I could achieve it. I admitted that perfecting it in a single attempt was beyond me, but I would reach it before the banquet began. He shook his head slightly. That was not what he had meant. He was asking about protecting the Cheon family. The words hit differently. I stood with them for a moment. Then I smiled and told him I would protect them. Nothing more than that. Cheon-sun Hak sheathed his sword and nodded. The energy in the forest had shifted, he said. He would go to the banquet hall first and leave the rest to me. He turned and walked away. I bowed slightly as he left. When I raised my head, my expression had already changed. I looked toward the tree line where shadows moved between trunks. They realized I had spotted them. They held still, waiting for the right moment, then broke from the tree line with rehearsed ease, greeting me with the story that they were Cheon clan disciples searching for a place to train. I told them to drop it. A group of grown men performing as students. That was what they had come with. The shock on their faces was immediate. Their leader steadied them internally, reasoning that I had no proof, and that the poison would handle the rest regardless. Elsewhere in the mansion, the Cheon clan training grounds were alive. The Marshall family's halls and open corners had filled in recent weeks with a particular kind of energy. Disciples who had been defeated by me, returning not out of obligation, but something harder to name. Noong Raya-un was there, running drills with focused repetition. Cha Hamong Ha Ha was in the corner, lifting with steady rhythm. Then someone burst through the entrance with a problem to report. The interruption barely registered. Every head stayed down. Every body kept moving until the name left his mouth. The first son. Every face in the room turned. The training stopped. The messenger took one look at the expressions surrounding him and told them quickly to get dressed. They had work to do. Back in the forest, I moved. I drove my sword into the exchange, catching one intruder's blade and redirecting its path in a single motion, then turned the scabbard and drove it hard into his stomach. He dropped without a sound, unconscious before he finished falling. I straightened, breathing hard, and looked back. 3 remained. They were already reassessing, adjusting their read of what stood in front of them. I was stronger than their intelligence had accounted for, and my sword was nothing like the Tang clan sabers they had trained against. That had been his mistake. He had underestimated me. I looked at the last one standing and told him it was time to reveal who he was. Though I already had my guess, he told me a guess was worthless without proof. I told him I did not need proof. Who else would arrange something like this besides the Tang clan? The shock crossed his face before he could stop it. I smiled. I told him it did not matter either way. Everyone would reach the same conclusion on their own, and thanks to what his people had done tonight, the marriage was finished. He smiled back and called me naive. I settled into my stance. I could feel it this time. The technique was there, waiting, clear in a way it had not been before. I launched forward and drove the reverse-scale cleaving sword straight at him. He moved to counter it. The collision cracked through the forest like a thunderclap. At the edge of the grounds, the Tang clan guard captain stood before a signal stick, the marker his men should have returned to long ago. He stared at it. Nothing. He turned the possibilities over and made his decision. The mission had failed. Every trace needed to disappear. The Tang clan would deny everything. Nearby, the Cheon clan disciples had come to a stop. One of them moved to intervene, reciting what he knew of Tang clan doctrine. Their poisons and hidden weapons were engineered with a lethality that made even a single, accidental moment of contact potentially fatal. Direct bloodline members were untouchable under their own law. Even an unintentional violation carried a death sentence. Even their own guards stepped aside for her without being asked. The thought of becoming bound to people like that sat uncomfortably in the group. Someone said it plainly. That kind of clan was not one you wanted as family. Then the one guiding the group remembered something that had been bothering him. There was that man, the one who had openly insulted the young master, and he was still breathing. In any other clan, his head would have turned up somewhere unpleasant by now. He was referring to Neung Ryeon, who had said things that no one in any serious clan would let stand. It was as though the Cheon clan made a habit of tolerating what others would never permit. His companion asked if they should go help the young master. That was enough deliberation, the other thought. Everyone else was already moving. It was their turn. Ryeon asked what any of them could actually do. The former top trainee stepped forward. He said he could not stand by. This was a matter of clan pride. Then he told them to find the first son first. The people needed someone they could trust. Behind that statement, his mind was already calculating. This was the perfect crisis. If he positioned himself correctly, demonstrated leadership, stayed visible, he could earn the captain's attention. And if everything fell apart, he could hand the situation to the first son and quietly switch allegiances to the Tang clan. Either outcome worked in his favor. To make that possible, he needed to stay close to me. He moved forward and stopped. A Tang clan warrior was here on Cheon ground. That was not part of anything he had anticipated. It was the guard captain, crouched low, setting fire to something, destroying evidence, cleaning the trail before anyone could follow it back. The captain looked up. Their eyes met. The former top trainee dropped immediately, pressing himself flat, heart hammering. The captain's gaze had been the kind that measured threat and responded in the same breath. He did not wait to find out if he had been fully seen. He ran. As he looked back over his shoulder, something moved through the air behind him. The other trainees turned at the sound. A Tang clan soldier landed in the clearing. 1 second, 2 trainees were dead. The former top trainee understood instantly. This was never going to stay clean. He had known something like this was possible.
The man realized the Cheon clan member had seen him, a witness who could link them to the ambush. He moved to end his life, but the trainee with the mark on his face blocked the strike with his sword sheath, which visibly stunned the elite guard. Before he could recover, another trainee came from the side, drawing his blade. The man stepped back, unable to accept that these were ordinary trainees, questioning how they could possibly be this strong. One of them set him straight. They were not ordinary trainees. They had been forging themselves since the shock of losing to the young master, never stopping. Another trainee cut off the first, reminding him that the Sichuan Dong clan was renowned for its poisons, then turned the question back on the man, asking whether he knew what the Cheon clan was famous for. The answer was its overwhelming swordsmanship, carried to the Heavenly Dragon and Heavenly Phoenix units personally molded by Captain Cheon Seon-hak. Out of every 10 trainees, only the top 5 earned a place in those units, and every one of them standing there were among those candidates. All except the one beside him, the guard noted, adding that even so, they were still just trainees. Then the ones he had cut down rose back to their feet. The man stared, the memory snapping into focus. They had blocked those strikes. The trainees closed in around him. He laughed, calling them pups who had no idea how terrifying the world truly was. They responded by showing him exactly what that world looked like. They seized him and moved on. The trainee from earlier hung back, telling the others to go ahead without him, claiming he needed to relieve himself. He doubled back and found the clothes still smoldering. Something about them kept pulling at him every time he tried to burn them. He made the decision to hold on to them. They could prove useful as leverage. The other trainees called out, asking whether he was finished yet. As they walked, they muttered that Lee So-gi was a creep, though they all agreed he was right. Finding the young master was the only thing that mattered. Then one of them spotted something ahead. It was me, standing there watching them, with the assassin laid out on the ground at my feet. As evening settled over the Cheon clan estate, word moved quickly that the family head was arriving. He came forward, flanked by his guards, carrying himself with a cold and commanding presence. Whispers swept through the gathered crowd. He was exactly what the rumors promised. Refined, striking, the kind of man people could not look away from. The women murmured that they should have been the ones at his side. The men compared him to a blade of the finest craft. He brought his hands together and thanked his distinguished guests for coming. Before continuing, he announced that a special guest was among them. The guard's voice rang out. The young lady of the Sichuan Dong clan was entering. The crowd stirred with surprise. The doors parted, and the guards called her name, Deng So-hai, the ice flower. Those watching understood at once that every word spoken about her beauty had fallen short of the truth. Though no one could make sense of why she was there, the family head spoke again. To deepen and solidify the bond between their two families and the Sichuan Deng clan, he declared the formal union of their bloodlines to marriage. The announcement broke into murmurs among the family members present, each quietly wondering whether it was the disgraced firstborn son who had been chosen. The captain of the Cheon clan said nothing. So-ye smiled to herself. It was done. With the family head having made the official announcement, there was no path back from it. The elder council had not shown their faces, and she found herself wondering when the two families would finally become one. The family head pulled one of the guards aside. The servants were searching for me, the guard told him. So-hai's guard leaned close and assured her that since I had not appeared, the guards would have handled everything cleanly. He had men stationed outside. There was no way I was getting through, let alone making an appearance at the banquet. The family head turned back to his guests and announced that the banquet would begin. The celebration carried on as the night deepened. The family head summoned the guard again, telling him the banquet was nearly at its end and asking whether I had been found. Seeing that I still had not come, he decided to press forward without me. He rose and thanked his guests once more, informing them that the clan's warriors would personally escort everyone home. He had already made arrangements with the officials, so no one needed to concern themselves with the curfew. Then noise broke from the courtyard outside. The guards' voices cut through the hall. The front line had been breached. A moment later, a Sichuan clan member came crashing through the doors and hit the floor in the middle of the banquet. I walked in behind him. I looked out across the hall and spoke. I said that they had dared to let outsiders block my path. The family head went silent. My uncle said nothing either. But Sohai looked at me like she wanted to tear me apart. I straightened up and made my announcement. The trash first son had arrived. Murmurs swept through the hall as everyone tried to place me. Then their eyes drifted to the trainees behind me, and the pieces began to fall together. The bully among them could not wrap his head around the idea that I had been so reckless. The former top trainee stepped forward and told everyone to lower their weapons. The man standing before them was the first son of the Cheon clan. The family head stared. He asked whether this roughed-up young man was truly his first son. His brother confirmed it. That answer hit him harder than he let show. He had only been away for a few months, and he could not understand how I had changed this much. I walked straight toward him. He told me to explain the meaning of this disruption. I told him I had something to say. He told me to speak. I had already thought it through. On the surface, Sohai and I were engaged, but to get my hands on that antidote, I had to sever this tie first. I told him plainly, I wanted the engagement canceled. The room erupted. Family members demanded to know whether I was openly defying the family head's decision. Across the hall, Sohai felt the ground shift beneath her composure. The family head told me to give him a reason. I told him everything. That day, the Dang clan had attempted to kill my maid, and they had done it right there on Cheon clan grounds. When I stepped in to stop them, they turned on me, even after I had identified myself as the first son. They then used the chaos of the fight to poison her. Wolyung was currently on the verge of death. Sohai was on her feet before I finished. She said the maid had ruined her clothing and that she had been punished strictly according to their laws. She asked why I was making such a fuss over a servant. I told her Wolyung was not just any servant. She was mine. That pushed Sohai past composure entirely. The family head kept his expression measured, though something shifted behind his eyes. It was the first time he was hearing any of this. It appeared the reports about me had left a great deal out. He spoke carefully. He said he was aware of the Dang clan's laws and respected them. He also acknowledged that my maid had provided cause by making forbidden contact. Furthermore, since the Cheon clan could not enforce the Dang clan's laws on their behalf, he could understand why she had taken matters into her own hands. On the matter of the maid, he would not be pursuing it further. He then told me that while the situation surrounding her was unfortunate, it was not sufficient grounds to dissolve a union between two great families. Sohai smiled. Then, the family head shifted his tone entirely. He said that if it was true they had drawn blades against me despite knowing I was the first son, that was a matter that could very well void the engagement. He turned to Sohai and told her to choose her answer carefully. Something settled in my chest. She did not hesitate. She said it never happened, that there had been a small commotion when I arrived, nothing more. One of the trainees spoke up immediately, calling it a lie. He said it had been a direct attack on the young master, and that he had witnessed it with his own eyes. Sohai turned on him and said he was simply covering for me, that his testimony was fabricated. I had heard enough. I told my men to bring them in. They dragged the assassin into the hall. The color left Sohai's face the moment she saw him. One of her own clan members, sent on the mission, disguised in Cheon clan trainee's clothing. The family head's expression darkened. The top trainee stepped forward and explained. They had found the man carrying suspicious vials, so they had made him drink the contents. He was now in a state no different from death, breathing, but gone. Their aim had been to stop me from reaching the banquet. The bully stepped forward. He said that for the past several months, he had not touched a single drop of alcohol. Every trainee standing in that hall could confirm it. He staked his life on that testimony. The family head's surprise was plain on his face. Sohai asked again where the proof was. The top trainee answered, according to the medical pavilion, those vials contained a specialized secret poison, one so uncommon that even the medical pavilion could not identify the exact formula. The only establishment capable of producing something like that was the Sichuan clan. Murmurs moved through the entire hall. Everyone was wondering the same thing. Would the engagement be broken? I looked at Sohai and smiled. It was time to push for the official annulment. She raised her fan and covered her face. She said it was so absurd it was making her laugh. She pointed out that simply carrying medicine was not the same as attempting to poison anyone. For all anyone knew, they could have had it for personal use. She then turned to the uniforms, noting that genuine trainee uniforms were not easy to obtain and asking how they could have gotten their hands on them in the first place. She suggested the room should be looking at an inside job rather than pointing fingers at her clan. And since when, she added, was a mere opinion from the Cheon clan's own medical pavilion considered hard evidence? She proposed that the Dang clan's medical pavilion be consulted instead to determine whether the poison truly belonged to them. I had not expected her to dismantle that argument so quickly. She looked at me and asked whether I had anything else. Before I could answer, 2 other trainees shoved one of her guards forward, saying the man had attacked them. She dismissed it without blinking, asking what a trainee being beaten by a warrior had to do with the matter of a marriage. I felt the momentum slip away from me. The family head spoke. He said the identities of those men would be investigated separately, and that the medical pavilion's findings alone could not stand as evidence. He asked whether I had anything further that directly connected those men to the Dang clan. He warned me plainly. If I was recklessly slandering the Dang clan without proof, I would be held accountable. My status would be stripped and I would face exile, or worse, be handed over to the mercy of the Dang clan. He asked one final time, where was my evidence? I had nothing. Not right now. Even if the truth surfaced later, it would be too late to stop the wedding. I glanced at my men and understood what was coming. Their punishment would be far heavier than mine. Then something caught my eye. I noticed the snake standing quietly among us. Lee Sok-gi was completely calm. Too calm. I looked at him closely and understood exactly what was happening. Beneath his outer clothing was the uniform of a Dang clan warrior. I cast my mind back to the moment the man had flinched at the sight of me. I had asked him plainly whether he was hiding something. The shock on his face had told me everything before he said a word. I told him I had heard the story and asked why a Dang clan warrior would suddenly turn on them. Was it because he had seen something? He told me he had seen nothing. I told him we were already in the same boat, and that if he was looking for a chance to drive a blade into my back, he should abandon the idea now. He told me not to joke about something like that and fell in with the other trainees. And now here he stood, having not lasted a single moment before switching sides. It made no difference. Whatever he had seen, he had no choice but to reveal everything. I turned to the family head and told him it was the truth. Then I said that even if the truth were buried, my punishment alone should be enough. He should spare the trainees. He said he could not do that. All 7 would face severe punishment. The snake's expression shifted. He began quietly counting the trainees. There were 6. With him, 7. The number landed on his face like a blow. I turned back to the family head and told him that Senior Lee Sok-gi, who had orchestrated this entire operation, deserved an even harsher punishment than the rest. The family head said his punishment would be death. Lee Sok-gi went completely white. His mind was already moving. He still had evidence he'd been planning to hand over to the Dang clan, a bargaining piece meant to buy him a new life as one of their disciples. But the situation had curdled. If he stayed silent, he would be framed as an accomplice and die anyway. If he spoke, everything changed. I pressed further. I said the 7 trainees and I were all in the same boat. We should be executed together. Senior Lee Sok-gi especially, whose loyalty was practically the stuff of legend. Since the family head was already going to kill him, he should be buried beside me, and the manner of it should be as painful as possible. I began describing exactly how it should be carried out. He could not hold it any longer. He shouted that he had evidence. I smiled. The family head turned to look at him. Sohai's eyes narrowed, trying to read what was coming. He produced the clothes, Dang clan garments. He said he had watched someone trying to burn them and understood immediately what they were. Those were the clothes of the masked attackers. After the ambush had failed, they had moved to destroy the evidence. They had tried to kill him to keep him silent, which was how he had come by his injuries. The matter was too serious for him to speak without first being certain, which was why he had waited. The other trainees exhaled. Something lifted in the room on their side of it. Then the Dang clan members moved. One of them shoved a trainee aside as Sohai and her guard stepped forward to examine the clothes. She looked over the slightly scorched garments, cursed the fools who could not finish what they started, and then straightened up. She conceded that yes, the clothes were indeed Dang clan garments, but asked where exactly the proof was that they had belonged to those specific attackers. I told her to close her mouth unless she wanted to add to her punishment. I told her calmly that the Cheon clan kept a highly trained tracking hound named Hunter. If I brought him out, and if what my men had said was accurate, she already knew what would follow. Even the dullest dog alive could trace a scent from clothing. I told her to hand over the antidote and accept the annulment. But if she wanted to wait for the dog, she and the entire Dang clan were welcome to carry the shame and disgrace of what came next. Then I told her to get out. She asked whether I was truly prepared to make an enemy of the Dang clan over a single maid. I told her to just hand it over. I was in a hurry. She ground her teeth. One of the elders accompanying Soai struck the table. He said the marriage had already been decided and demanded to know why anyone was still talking. Then he released his aura. The room felt it immediately. Those who recognized it went still. It was the violet cloud flame, a technique that could only be manifested by a supreme master who had transcended the peak. The elder's voice dropped low and hard. He said the Cheon clan had the audacity to treat an honored guest this way, and that no one had ever shown their clan this kind of disrespect before, because everyone who had tried was dead. My uncle's aura answered him before his words did. The violet cloud flame rose from my uncle as well, meeting the elders with equal weight, something no one in that hall had ever witnessed. My uncle told him to watch his mouth, and said that if he kept talking, he would show him personally why the heavenly dragon's blade made the entire world tremble. The elder moved to attack. My uncle moved with him. The Dang clan men readied themselves. The Cheon clan followed. The hall sat on the edge of a full collision, and the guests looked around at one another in disbelief, unable to fathom how an engagement banquet had arrived at this. My father watched all of it without moving. Then he spoke. He told Elder Dong to settle his anger. A marriage pact once made could not be dissolved by the will of one side alone. Not unless that side had committed a grave and demonstrable error. Elder Dang said those were strange words. The way he heard it, the Cheon clan was the one seeking the annulment. My father said that if it had come across that way, he apologized. Then the air in the hall changed. People felt it before they understood it. The atmosphere shifted, and color began bleeding into the space around my father. The table directly in front of him split apart without being touched. 5 luminous spears materialized at his back, each radiating a distinct light, all of them burning with quiet, absolute authority. The guests recognized it instantly. The 5 colored rainbow blades, the legendary 5-branched rainbow sword, a manifestation from the realm of transcendence itself. His voice came out calm and final. He said that everything had its limits and told them not to test his patience any further. The 2 of them stopped immediately. The family head turned to my uncle and instructed him to examine the Dang clan uniforms secured by the trainees, question every related party, and cross-examine all testimonies given, separating truth from falsehood in every statement made that evening. He then announced that the marriage would be placed on hold until the results of the investigation were finalized. Elder Dang said nothing outwardly, but his thoughts were moving fast. The Cheon clan was powerful. That much was undeniable, but in a straight contest of strength, their clan had more than enough to wipe them from existence. Yet, when he looked at his own men, he saw fear. Standing before that overwhelming force, defiance felt not just impossible but sinful. Every last person in that hall had lost their will to fight after witnessing what the family head had just shown them. He turned the question over in his mind, wondering how it had come to this. It had been the perfect opening into the Central Plains, a clean path around the scrutiny of those self-righteous sects. The humiliation would be repaid 1,000-fold. Sohai broke the silence. She asked whether the Cheon clan was a martial family. The family had confirmed that it was. She then proposed they settle the matter the way martial families did, through a duel between the 2 parties. She asked for my decision. I asked her why I would agree to that. I told her to hand over the antidote and go back to Sichuan. She produced the antidote and held it where I could see it. She said that if I won, she would throw it in as part of the outcome. Then her voice dropped and the real terms came with it. If I refused, Wu Young would not survive the night. And if the engagement was dissolved through the investigation, a great many people would die because of it. If I did not want either of those things, I knew what to do. She said that since she was a delicate woman, her personal guard would fight in her place. Then she asked who would represent the Cheon clan. My father said that being a martial family did not mean we were obligated to accept every duel put before us. I called Sohei's name and told her to keep her word. Then I turned to my father and told him I would do it. He went quiet. After a moment, he asked how on earth I planned to defeat a personal guard of the Dang clan. My uncle told him to hold his judgment and watch. He would explain afterward. My father went silent again. His mind settled on what he knew of me. Weak, irresponsible, a disgrace of a first son. Someone who had never had a single person stand beside him. He was on the verge of refusing. Then he saw the trainees. They were standing at my side, composed and unhesitating. Not a trace of doubt on any of their faces. That was all he needed. He accepted the duel. Representing the Cheon clan would be me, Cheon Mu Ryong. So Hai told her men to clear the tables. I told mine to clear the chairs. Elder Deng smiled and remarked that they were working in perfect harmony. He glanced at the family head and said the two of them made a fine pair. So Hai turned to her guard and told him to do his best. Then she paused and asked whether he remembered. In a sanctioned duel, any injuries sustained were exempt from liability. She held his gaze just long enough to make certain he understood her meaning, then walked away. After a short while, a soldier stepped forward into the cleared hall. With the space already emptied on all sides, he announced that by mutual agreement, the matter would be decided by duel. Let it begin. I went straight at him. No feeling out, no caution, pure offense from the first step. He coughed, then his eyes dropped to my arm and locked there. He adjusted his grip and angled his blade to take it off at the joint. Before the edge could find me, I pulled my arm clear and went immediately for his throat. He caught it with the flat of his sheath, then fed aura into his blade and drove the counter straight at my neck. It was fast. Fast enough that I had no choice but to throw myself backward, leaving the ground entirely and landing several paces back. The onlookers exchanged glances. His technique was clear to anyone with eyes. Sword chi, aura poured into the blade and released against his opponent, and his opponent was nothing but the trash-first sun. I smiled. I could see it, his heaven. I raised my sword again. The man leveled his blade across from me. I told him to come. He launched forward. I moved to meet him. Both of us committed. Both of us ready. He threw the first strike and I blocked it cleanly. He was a first-class swordsman who had fully mastered sword chi, stronger than me by a clear margin. He came around to my back and I clashed to meet him, but he read it and slipped right. That was the moment he decided the fight belonged to him. He went for a kick. I dodged it. Barely, my knee nearly grazed the ground. He stepped back, then launched forward again. I read the target and blocked, but the force behind it was savage. He was going for my arm again. I kept turning it over in my mind, wondering why he wanted that arm so badly. I stepped back, then surged forward at full speed, needing to see whether he could truly match it. I left the ground and rose into an overhead strike. Then I faded. His expression cracked. He thought I was attempting the same foolish trick again, that I was not merely weak, but an absolute fool. He decided to cleave straight through whatever I brought and take the arm with it. But I spoke as I moved. Or perhaps the words came from somewhere deeper, rising out of what I had come to understand. In the realm of understanding, there is knowledge and there is ignorance, and between them lies opinion. At a glance, an opinion appears convincing, but it is nothing more than flawed knowledge dressed as truth. This is why the sages teach that opinion can never serve as absolute proof. Your perception of an opponent is nothing more than an opinion built from the past. In that moment, you are no longer looking at a living person. You are looking at a wax figure cast over someone who is already gone, a statue molded from the shell of the deceased. Therefore, the very moment you feel you truly understand your enemy is the exact moment you understand nothing at all. This court warrior, do you truly believe you know Mu Ryang from crossing blades with him once? A flash of blue light split through the warrior's eyes as his sword passed through the space where I had been. I was already at his side. Panic seized him as he wrenched his blade upward, but he was already too late. I had passed through him and the strike was done. My father stared, the composure on his face giving way to something unguarded. What the escort warrior felt in that instant, the only thing that left his mouth was a scream. My uncle's voice rang out immediately, declaring the match over. He thought to himself that it was not a perfect reverse scale slash, but it was as close as it needed to be. The escort warrior could not accept what had happened. He turned back, disbelieving. Even Sohai and the elder stood frozen, the same word turning over and over in their minds. Impossible. Sweat moved down her face as I stretched my hand toward her and told her to keep her word and hand it over. She ground her teeth until her jaw tightened with fury, and then she placed the antidote in my hand. The moment my fingers closed around it, I turned and walked away. Then my body betrayed me. The shaking started without warning. Something was wrong. I could feel it before I could name it. My breathing was coming apart. During the fight, I had forced my meridians open for a split second to resist his sword chi, and now the yin energy was flooding back in, clogging every pathway, collapsing the flow of my internal energy entirely. Blood began to pour from my nose. My vision bled red at the edges, and the ground came up to meet me. I hit the floor. The antidote was right there beside me, close enough to see, close enough to reach, and my body would not move. All the trainees broke into a run toward me. Before any of them could reach, my father and my uncle launched into the air above them and landed at my side. My father gathered me up immediately and pressed his fingers to my pulse, my uncle doing the same alongside him. What he found stopped him cold. The energy blocking my meridians was coming from the elixir inside my own dantian, the same energy he had been unable to touch before. If it was not resolved immediately, my internal power would backflow, rupturing my meridians and shattering my dantian entirely. In those last moments before the darkness took me, I could hear my father's voice. He told my uncle to wrap up the banquet, see to it that medical support was provided for me and the trainees, and send the antidote to Wolyang at once. My uncle accepted without a word, and then I let go and lost consciousness. My father began transferring his aura into me. Qi deviation is a state in which internal energy reverses course or breaks free of control, causing the simultaneous collapse of the dantian, the meridians, and the mind. In the early stages, immediate action at the core is everything. The practitioner must expel the foreign energy, suppress the backflow, stabilize what remains, and guide it back through the correct channels. Because one must govern another person's energy as precisely as their own, success is never guaranteed, not even from the realm of transcendence. And in my case, the yin energy lodged throughout my meridians had to be dissolved at the same time. That evening, the family head's red cloud flame chi filled the banquet hall for a long time. The Dang clan was escorted out in silence and in shame. Elder Dang spoke as they left. He said the first son's condition was nothing like what they had been told. If the young man was truly that gifted, there was no way the Cheon clan would have ever proposed this marriage. They would never have risked drawing the hostility of the Central Plains sects over it. He paused. Regardless, he said, it was a shame it had ended this way. Sohai walked beside him, saying nothing at first. Then she thought about it, that we were going to meet again. Her mind drifted back to when she had first arrived. It had been a dog that came charging out, barking, that startled the maid and caused the food to spill onto her clothing. Then the memory dissolved, and she walked out of the Cheon clan gates with the rest of her people. At that same moment, on the other side of the estate, the family head stood alone in the banquet hall. The tables were split, the chairs pushed aside, the candles burning low over a space that had been full of noise and people not long before. Now, there was only silence. He stood there without a word. My uncle asked him if he was all right. He did not respond. The silence stretched. My uncle broke it himself. He said that if he was being honest, he fully understood the reasoning. No matter how urgent my condition was, proposing a marriage to the Dang clan had been an extreme measure. He said he was glad it had been annulled in the end, but they had made a genuine enemy now. The Dang clan would not forget this. My father told him he was wrong. That stopped my uncle cold. My father said he had not brought the Dang clan in because of my illness. My uncle asked him why then. My father told him that without borrowing the strength of the Dang clan, he would not have been able to protect Mirang. Protect. My uncle turned the word over, trying to find what it meant in this context. My father called his name and asked him whether he had noticed something. He said he could not remember how many years it had been since I had last looked him directly in the eye. And from what he had seen tonight, it appeared I had finally made some friends. My uncle said nothing, genuinely surprised. My father said he was tired and would be heading in first. He began to walk away. My uncle stood in the empty hall, turning his brother's words over in silence, thinking that the former head had looked almost at ease. My father stopped walking. He said it was time for a drink after all these years. He told his brother that he felt like getting drunk tonight. My uncle smiled and nodded, falling into step behind him. He said that sounded good to him too. The two of them walked out together. Outside, the trainees moved as a group through the night air, still processing everything. They said they had been incredible. It felt like something out of a dream. Their names and what they had done would be remembered. As of today, they said they were legends. Morning came quickly. Thunder. The stray dog who had made the Cheon clan estate his territory was brought his morning meal by one of the maids. He ate noisily. The sound of it filtered through the walls of the medical pavilion and pulled a pair of eyes open. Wolyang sat up slowly, taking in the unfamiliar ceiling above her. She did not know where she was or why she was here. Then the other maid saw her and screamed, not in fear, but in relief, her voice breaking as she cried out that Wolyang was finally awake, that she had been unconscious for days. Wolyang asked what had happened. The maid told her. She had nearly died from the Dang clan's poison. If the young master had not risked his life in a duel to obtain the antidote, she would not be breathing right now. Wo-young stared at her. She asked what she meant. Me, risking my life. The maid caught herself and said she was not supposed to say that. Wo-young told her to tell her everything. The maid gave in. After the duel with the Dong clan's escort warrior, the young master had collapsed, blood pouring from his nose. He had fallen into chi deviation, and the family head had barely managed to pull him back from the edge. Then, the rest of what the maid had said caught up with her. That to save her, I had forced the annulment of the engagement with the Dang clan, and because of that, the Cheon clan and the Dang clan were now bitter enemies. She rose from the bed and began to run, the maid's words chasing her down the corridor. She asked herself how a life as lowly as hers had managed to unravel something so enormous. She did not know what she was supposed to do with that. She ran straight to my room and called my name. Then she stopped. My uncle was seated beside me. She stood in the doorway, completely taken aback, trying to make sense of what she was seeing. My uncle turned and looked back at her. She could not understand why the captain was there. He called her name. She dropped into a bow immediately, her mind already turning against her, convincing her that this was her fault, that the marriage had fallen apart because of her, and that he was here to make her answer for it. He told her that as it happened, this worked out perfectly. Since the young master was showing no signs of waking soon, he would leave him in her care. He looked at me for a moment, then rose from the chair and moved toward the door. She stepped quickly out of his path. Then he stopped and placed something in her hand. She looked down. It was a pass for the Heavenly Dragon Library. She told him immediately that she could not accept it. She was only a maid. How could she hold something so precious? He asked her who had said she was just a maid. He reminded her that I had declared in front of every person in that hall that she was mine. As far as he knew, she was the only person I had, so she should stop diminishing herself. Besides, he told her, I would wake up soon enough. She should not worry too much. Then he left, and she was alone with me. She turned the words over slowly. The young master's only person. She had always been my personal maid. After some time had passed, my body began to tremble. Sweat broke across my face. I was back in the rain. I stood before the Cheon clan estate as fire consumed everything around me. Clan members were being cut down where they stood. Then a scream tore through the air behind me, and I spun to find an unknown warrior driving straight toward me. I reached for my sword and found nothing. Nothing at my side. I had no choice. I went at him barehanded. My fist passed through him as though he were made of smoke. He moved past me without slowing and struck down a clan member at my back. I stood there trying to make sense of what I was seeing. I looked back and saw who he had truly been targeting, a body on the ground. These people, these attackers, they were those demon cult bastards. And then the memory locked into place. These were my memories from the night the Cheon clan was annihilated, the bloodbath that had unfolded because Cheon Mu-ryong had brought the demonic cult into the family. Even those who had once stood beside him lay dead because of it. And it had not stopped there. So many others had fallen alongside them. I kept asking myself whether any of this made sense. The Cheon clan was counted among the top 10 great families. No matter how reckless or ignorant one man could be, a clan of that standing should never have crumbled this easily to a demonic cult. There had to be something more to it, something I still did not know about that night. Then I noticed someone beside me. I turned and it was Uncle Gumsan, one of the very few in the clan who had ever shown me genuine warmth. To think they had even killed someone who had never lifted a blade in his life. Then the sound of steel rang out from beyond the hall. It was at the exact moment that he betrayed me. I recognized the voice immediately. I ran out of the hall through the courtyard fast enough to arrive just in time to watch it happen. Cheon Mu-ryong's head came off in a single stroke from the giant ancient warrior's blade, tossed from his shoulders like something weightless, bouncing off the stone ground and rolling to a stop directly at my feet. I stood over it. I thought it was a sad thing, that the first son had come to such a pitiful end. But then, my end had not been so different. Stabbed from every side like an animal. The anger that rose in me was not something I chose. It simply opened my eyes. I was staring at the face of that fat Cheon moron. I asked him what he had been so afraid of. What could have possibly terrified him enough to drive a blade into the back of the one person who had given everything for him? Why had he brought the demonic cult into this family? And now here he was, looking exactly as miserable as he deserved. My voice dropped. I told him to answer me. Just once. Answer me. I could not contain it any longer. Then another voice cut through. The voice said that if they had been foolish enough to make an incompetent wretch like me the family head, then I should have simply done as I was told and followed orders.